This is one of the hardest things to do. Frankly, like I don't think you can undercount how hard it is to do it. My recipe, so one, if you don't, I guess if you look at your company, like your leadership team and who's on it, if you were to draw out all your skills, like the technical co-founder, the commercial co-founder, I think most paradigms would say like those two overlaps have enough independent surface area that where they overlap, like you get a 3 order of magnitude better performer, like somebody who's like 0.001% better.
Are you a scaling SaaS founder? Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where B2B storytelling proves that even SaaS products can have character arcs, plot twists, and occasionally a happy ending. Just like the Hallmark movies you've been watching, but with fewer flowers and more dashboards. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. What if your company's story was a movie? Are you the wise guide helping your customer save the day, or just the forgettable side character with one line of dialogue? Today's episode is for the founders, CEOs, and senior execs, the people who, let's be honest, live in that thrilling space between visionary genius and I'm about to lose my mind. You built something great, now you want to grow it. But when it comes to B2B sales and marketing, getting people to care is trickier than convincing your team to stop using synergy, unironically. Here's the thing, your customers don't want to hear how amazing you are, they want to hear how amazing they can be thanks to you. That's right. The spotlight isn't on you, it's on them. And today's episode is all about harnessing the superpower of storytelling and customer centric approaches to close more deals, build deeper relationships, and maybe, just maybe, stop hearing, I'll get back to you next quarter. We don't want that. Today, we'll unpack how you as a leader can become your company's chief storyteller without feeling like you're auditioning for TEDx. You'll learn how hospitality-inspired customer experiences, think ridiculously personalized, can make your clients feel like the heroes of their own business epics. And yes, we'll even get into the art of messaging, why you should stop guessing what your customers want and just, ask them. Novel idea, right? If you've ever wondered why your brilliant pitch still somehow misses the mark, or how you can make your customers feel like VIPs without a velvet rope, then you're in the right place. So grab your notebook, caffeine of choice, and let's dive in. Last Tuesday was our Christmas episode where I shared personal insights and professional lessons from a really unique experience I had meeting someone at the end of a 2,683-mile long journey. We uncovered how resilience, mindset, and unexpected challenges can shape your leadership for unstoppable momentum in 2025. If you missed it, ask yourself, are you ready to lead your SaaS business with clarity and grit this coming year? Our expert guest last week was Teresa French, founder and CEO of Cellmark 360. Teresa revealed her groundbreaking approach to sales success, sharing actionable strategies from her conversation co-pilot system to help teams crush quotas and build lasting client relationships. If you missed that, that is a must listen as well. My guest today is Peter Kuhn, a 15-year veteran of the startup scene, and he knows what it takes to scale B2B SaaS sales from founder-led hustles to multi-million-dollar engines. Today, he'll share actionable strategies on storytelling, messaging, and enabling sales teams to win big, no matter the stage of business. So welcome someone that will transform the way you think about growth and sales leadership, Peter Kuhn. Hey, Peter, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to talk about sales and messaging, storytelling, and alignment with our ideal clients. So tell me a little bit about the background in sales and why storytelling.
Yeah, I got into sales. Geez, I probably got into sales if I think about it, like when I was 10, going around the block with my buddies selling landscaping and mulching trees and trying to go door to door knocking to get folks to spray paint the curb with the house number on it so that the people could like identify their houses. But I got involved in B2B sales in 2010, 2011. So a little bit ago, first sales job was working at a company called Live Intent that's in the email marketing space. They actually just got bought by Zeta, a publicly traded company, for a nice $250 million exit.
Nice.
Um, Spent about 6 years there and then went over and worked at a company called Moat, where I joined as the first sales rep. It's a B2B SaaS company in the marketing advertising technology space. Worked there, first seller, all the way up from single digit millions to over 100 million in ARR, and then got to be part of that acquisition into Oracle. So I've been working in sales my whole career, B2B SaaS sales.
That's fantastic. So, what about storytelling in sales? Why is it that storytelling is so compelling in helping to connect a product with a customer?
Yeah, I guess like the way that I think about it is um, the lives that we live when we are in a business environment, if you're in front of your laptop or if you're at a conference, even though we're playing the role or we're like in the mindset of doing our job, we're still human beings. And human beings have been telling stories for thousands of years. Like ever since somebody sat around a fire and came back and said, hey, here's how that deer hunt went, or here's what happened when we were like coming back across that river, people have been telling each other and painting narratives with stories. Even going so far back as ancient man inside of a cave, like drawing on a wall. And when we fast forward to the paradigm that we're living in today, and folks are selling these like complex workflow automations or systems that automate certain outcomes, or like now even AI systems that help a business process, or said simply enterprise sales or enterprise B2B SaaS, those products aren't always really good at explaining what they do themselves. If they did, you wouldn't really need salespeople. And so
Right.
when I think about storytelling in sales, what I think about is how do you position what you do and what your product does uh, inside of a market opportunity that a customer cares about, a customer being a user or a buyer of that product.
That makes so much sense. And what are the steps to ensure that a company's messaging and their positioning is really aligned with their customers' pain points and their aspirations?
I actually think so. A lot of people, we've been talking to a lot of product marketers recently. I've interviewed about 50 product marketers. That's one of those roles that I think didn't exist like 10 years ago at the scale that it is today. And one thing I noticed a lot of was that folks say messaging and positioning. And I actually think that's backwards. I think it needs to be positioning and then messaging.
I
Because
like
you
it.
start with what is the world? What is the market opportunity that we're going after? What's the thing that the incumbents, either like the really big companies, they're taking money from enterprises or smaller businesses, are not doing as well as they could be doing? And this is like Clayton Christensen's classic innovator's dilemma. Like,
Right.
why is a big company not innovating? Because they're not incentivized to.
Right.
You know, if you can build a new product that costs less money and is done at a better margin, like their customers will get wind of that and demand a better price. And so they're not incentivized to do it. And that's where market opportunity presents. If you're a founder or if you're a product owner or an engineer or a product marketer at a bigger company, the position of your product is how do you see yourself as in that market? What's the geography of the big guys, like the mountain ranges all the way away from you, like the plane of individuals that you're all in together, like that ocean that's behind you? Hopefully it's a blue ocean, maybe it's a red ocean, it's very competitive. And the message at its most simple is the vocabulary you use that shortcuts understanding between you and the users and the buyers, or we all call them customers. And so that's the way I think about it is, and you asked about the steps. One would be, what is the market opportunity? What is the thing, the problem I'm solving, or the job that I think we can do better with technology, with automation or software, or like access to some data? Why do I see that logically? Logically as an opportunity because stuff has changed, like technology has evolved. The folks who are building it have moved on. And so now the folks that are maintaining it just aren't looking strategically at the opportunity. And then what do I see as the message that can articulate that change that inspires people? And so there are like a ton of questions you can ask along the way to go do that. But the story is then forming that in a narrative that when you say it, people pay attention and they want to repeat it.
Yeah.
They want to say, like, hey, I would love for you to actually come in and tell that to the rest of my team, or hey, I'd love for you to come in and give that as a presentation to our executive team to tell them how you see the world shaping around you.
I like that. And just that connection is so important. And I like that you put positioning before messaging. And
Yeah.
it's where it belongs, because if you can't really develop a message and then figure out how do I position that, you have to start with the positioning and where is it that it's going to be, how are we going to show up, and then what's the message that supports that.
Yeah. And that iterates over time.
Yeah.
Your position, I guess the way I think about it is like your position, it might change a little bit if build a new product or you uncover that there's a new type of customer you can sell to that you didn't account for when you first started going to market. And so you may realize, oh, wow, I'm in a marketplace. I can position myself to both buyers and sellers in that marketplace. I think we see that happen a lot in
Yes.
like vertical SaaS. If you're like on a firm, like one of these buy now, pay laters, like you can sell to both the retailer as well as the bank that wants to help issue the
Right.
loan, as well as maybe the platform. If you're in the advertising technology business, like you could sell to both publishers, people who sell ads, as well as advertisers, people who buy
Right.
them. And your position might shift a little bit as you realize, oh, wow, I'm actually in a different spot. Your message will definitely shift. The
Yes.
frequency of message is going to shift quite a bit. And I think it's important to just keep that in the back of your mind as you go and experiment, even from call to call, like conversation to conversation.
Yeah. It seems like the positioning is really around the problem they're solving, because the advertisers are solving one problem. And then the people who are selling that have the ad platforms, they're solving another problem. And so
Yeah.
it's really making sure that you have that alignment. And you're right, the messaging is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
as a company evolves, how often should companies revisit their messaging and positioning, especially in fast moving markets like SaaS?
I don't think there's like a great answer for how often. But here's what I would say: if you haven't if you haven't gotten to a point where when you share your story, like whether that's a sales pitch or your vision pitch, like if you're going out and pitching investors, it's a very different pitch than if you're pitching customers
Yes.
because they're both buying very different things from you. One's
Yep.
buying a piece of equity and stake in your company. The other one's buying the product that you create. If you aren't getting heads nodding and you aren't getting people smiling and repeating, yeah, I totally get it. Oh, you nailed it. Oh, you said it. You have to keep trying. It's almost like you're in the music studio and like you haven't quite figured out the hit yet. Like you haven't boiled it down to the thing that's going to cause the wallets to open up and the money to come out of them. And so if you're small, and I would say like less than 10 million, you probably want to be doing it like deal to deal, trying new stuff, especially if you're the founder. I think it's a little bit different if you're a salesperson. If you're a salesperson who's doing this, hopefully you're one that's got some of this range. Like you are like very good naturally at storytelling and you have some of those product marketing genes. As you get bigger, the way that most folks think about it is like product release to product release. If you're releasing a new product or an upgraded feature, or there's some case study you can talk about, you're thinking about the campaign alongside that. So maybe that happens a couple of times a year. But in terms of likelihood, what's the probability that somebody who's listening to this podcast would say, how often should I do it? The likelihood is more that like you haven't found resonance yet. So like you should be doing it constantly and obsessing about it all day. What's the market opportunity and what's the story that I'm going to tell in that market that makes me sound different than everybody else?
So good. And I love the analogy, like the music, and you're really looking for that hit, or a comedian. You're going out, you're
Mm-hmm.
testing new material all the time, and you're finding out what works with audiences, and then you start doing that more, and then you start, really building that following.
Yeah. Yeah. The comedian analogy is a great one. Like if you're a stand-up comic, you are literally a storyteller.
Yeah.
If you're doing like quick one-liner jokes, the story you're telling is I know lots of one-liners. And then you train the audience to anticipate these one-liners, and laughing, I think, comes from the same part of the brain that like crying or fear and everything comes from. It's the
Yeah.
unanticipated resolution of what has just happened before you. And that makes you laugh. And if you think about a stand-up comic, maybe more along the lines of like Dave Chappelle or Jerry Seinfeld, they do long form storytelling.
Yes.
I see them as like the human investigative journalists of like patterns in society. And if you look into their process, all they're doing is observing and writing and testing
Yep.
from a small audience to a big audience. And then what at the end, that Netflix special or that HBO special, it doesn't start there.
Right.
It started literally probably years, if not like decades earlier. Like some of those jokes could have started years ago.
Yeah.
That they finally found out like now's the moment to do that. I think there's a lot of parallels in storytelling in B2B.
Yeah.
Like what stories are you interjecting and how are you thinking about telling that?
When a company is thinking about that and what story should I tell, how do they do that and differentiate themselves in the marketplace and tell a story that resonates, but also is true to who they are as a brand and where they want to go.
Yeah, this is one of the hardest things to do. Frankly, like you can't, I don't think you can undercount how hard it is to do it. My recipe, so one, if you don't, I guess if you look at your company, like your leadership team and who's on it, if you were to draw out all your skills, like the technical co-founder, the commercial co-founder, I think most paradigms would say those two overlaps have enough independent surface area that where they overlap, like you get a 3 order of magnitude better performer, like somebody who's like 0.001% better. But if that commercial person or that technical person doesn't also have, say, the communicative or simplifying a complex product or topic into something that's like very colloquial and understandable, you probably have a gap that you either want to find out how to fill with a strategic early hire, somebody who can bridge that gap. I think sometimes those are in product marketing roles, sometimes they're in sales and commercial roles, but probably someone who comes from a background that's not very like traditional MBA or business or consulting, probably somebody who like studied music or journalism or has a background in philosophy or deep writing. And that person will naturally be thinking about this. They'll just naturally want to be telling stories. It's not like, how do I turn on the story switch? It's more like it's default on all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess I asked the question more about storytelling from the company's perspective, but I think there's a more important perspective, and that is really a customer-centric narrative. And so flipping that around, making them the hero of the story, telling their story and how their life is impacted by your solution.
Yeah. You said, I think the hero's journey. So you said like the customer's the hero is
Yes.
definitely a good one. Joseph Campbell. And every great story that you've ever listened to has followed that pattern. Like
Yes.
conflict, there's then a call to action. They then go out and actually perform the task. There's some sort of guide along the way. A lot of sort of storytelling experts will say that you are the guide, the customer is the hero. I think those are useful frameworks. I also think that if you were to just go on YouTube and type in Steve Jobs keynote address, you'll hear him tell stories about the world and why Apple is inventing products for their customers in the way that they are. And if you listen for the pace of how he talks and you listen for the vocabulary choices he makes very intentionally colloquial word choices. If you listen to Barack Obama, how he gave speeches,
Yeah.
these are done in stories and in formats that are very accessible to the audience. And so if you think about your product, like your very complex piece of technology that's like probably more duct to get taped together than you'd ever admit, you want to figure out how do I package that and describe what that thing does and why in a way that the audience, i.e. your customer, is going to get within a couple of minutes, ideally a couple of seconds. And the rules that I like are simple story arc structure. What's the introduction, i.e. like, why are we here and what are we talking about? To me, that's like the market opportunity. What is the thing that's changing? The challenge. It's like, what's the thing that we are addressing because we see it as impacting you? So that's our position, but it's also the customer's position in market. Some regulatory shift is happening. Some new piece of technology has emerged. Some trend that historically you weren't able to actually mitigate outside of people is now capable of being done with technology. And then what's the opportunity? So this would be the messaging that you frame within all of that. How are you actually going to go out and then communicate that in a way that the customer goes, that is my reality? And the best source of that, by the way, we were talking about stand-up comics, it's just the customers. Literally just go talk to them. Like you and I are having a conversation right now, podcast format. Go talk to the customers in an interview format where the goal isn't necessarily to get them to enter a sales funnel and convert. It's just to understand how their lives are going, what their jobs are, how they do them. You will get all of the pieces of vocabulary you need to then interject into a sales pitch later that afternoon.
So good. And thinking about having those conversations, you don't necessarily want your product roadmap to turn into feature requests by customers, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also we have to have their feedback in order to build something that they want. So, what are the most effective ways for founders and sales teams to actively listen to customers to inform their messaging and their product roadmap?
Yeah, this is a great question. I also don't think that there's any like strong rule on how to do this or like some number. I'll tell you that when I first started Baku with Guy, my business partner, I asked Jonah Goodhart, who's the founder of Moat, the company that he was our CEO, the company I had worked at. I said, do you have any advice for us? And he said, go have 1,000 conversations.
So good.
1,000 conversations. And I said, why? And he said, when I started Moat, I asked Mike Walrath, who was the chairman of Moat and was the founder of a company called Right Media, that was one of the first DSPs, programmatic ad buying platforms. Yahoo bought them. I asked him, hey, any advice? And he said, go have 1,000 conversations. And he said, when you have those conversations, and they will happen over the course of months if you aggressively do it, years if you do it passively, the themes will emerge.
Yes.
Oh, damn, there's a better way to do this. That's like your idea on what you're going to go build, your thesis. Then going and testing that and forming that into a hypothesis is go build something and show it to them. And make the feedback loops, for those that are listening, I'm holding my fingers an inch apart, that close. I built something. Can I show it to you? I built something. Can I show it to you? And if you built something worth using, they'll use it, i.e. like you've built something people want. And if you haven't, it will be a struggle. Why am I not resonating? You probably built something that misunderstood their requirements.
Yeah. And I see that on a regular basis where a founder will build something and want to show it. Hey, look at this great thing I built. Where do you think I can sell it? And I think we get this a little backwards.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard conversation to have. If you've got a product looking for a market versus having a market and looking to solve a need specifically for them and having that feedback loop. I love that. Having that say, hey, look what I built. Want to see it?
Yeah. I think Bob Mesta, he coined the phrase jobs to be done.
Yeah.
He's a contemporary of Clayton Christensen. He recently wrote a book called Demand Side Sales. It's on Spotify as well. If you're on Spotify Premium, like it's free audiobook. And his argument is it's fun to build supply. Like it's fun to invent stuff. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do is like whiteboard out some like cool magic thing that I dreamed up. But that's not how B2B works, nor is it how like consumerism works. Like supply meets demand. And when that clicked for me, I was like, oh, damn, combine that with the 1,000 conversations concept. Go talk to people you think might buy from you. It might be based on their title. It's probably even better to base it on their job because they don't necessarily give themselves titles. The person who hired them gave them a title.
Right.
And so the person hired them for a job that like maybe they're not even expecting to do. Like plenty of product marketers I spoke to said, I identify as a product marketer and my job is positioning and messaging and user research and strategy, but they hired me effectively as a growth marketer. Very different job. So think about the job that you're trying to help enhance through your product and go talk to people that are likely doing that job, which might correlate to title, but probably more so correlates to like behaviors. And you're going to learn a lot about building something people want to use.
Yeah. And closing that loop, making that gap as small as possible kind of goes, that's the external side. The internal side is that gap between sales and marketing and product. And then taking that back and uniting the alignment between those three roles.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this is one of the harder things to do. There's a lot of folks out there right now talking about we will drive alignment for your team, or we're going to build a product that's going to align everyone. I guess in my mind, that was what OKRs were supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I guess I've heard people say OKRs were invented as a way for Google to distract their competitors. I don't know if that's actually likely. I think it's like pretty low probability, but when I've seen them do well, like it's because everybody actually read the book and knows how to set an objective and a measurable KPI.
Yeah.
And that should do it. Like assuming a lot of other stuff is going on, you don't have to iterate like week to week. You know, if you're setting quarterly KPIs or OKRs, and then you have to iterate week to week, that's going to be a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
I do think what I'm noticing, at least with the early teams, so maybe this is useful for folks who are like just getting going and they're less than 10 people on the team, somebody who sells, somebody who builds. So somebody who's confident talking to customers, ideally is capable of doing the storytelling, somebody who builds, somebody who's also confident being in front of customers and rank ordering needs and making resource decisions around when to go build them. If those things are happening with the founding team, your likelihood of success, the probability goes significantly up because you're literally controlling for the thing you can control for, which is talking to customers and building stuff that they want and then bringing it back to them. As the team grows, I do think that there's always like a tendency to get to this like too many cooks in a kitchen thing, which I think is like the CEO for some reason has tried to outsource the storytelling to somebody else. And you just should just not do that. If you're sub 50 million in ARR, which like most people won't even get to, it's the CEO's job. It's the founder's job
Yeah.
to be articulating market opportunity. And if you are rising to that occasion as a founder, like every great founder we've worked with, 70 plus companies the past 3 years, the ones that were doing really well owned it 100%. So I don't think any external company can really do this very well. I think you got to do it yourself. That's my conclusion.
Ready to dominate your market and skyrocket your revenue? Dive into Small Fish Big Pond, delivering a world class business that swims circles around competitors. This book is packed with powerful marketing and leadership insights guaranteed to transform your business and operate world class. Small Fish Big Pond delivers proven strategies to sharpen your marketing message, deliver unmatched value to your clients, and guide your prospects' buying journey to one inevitable conclusion: that your company is the only solution for them. Inside, you'll find step by step frameworks and time tested growth principles to attract your ideal clients, convert them, and then turn them into your passionate brand ambassadors. Grab your copy today in print, ebook, or audio at smallfishbigpond.com or on Amazon. Plus, remember, every book sale supports charity. All profits go there. Always have, always will. So dive in and make a difference. I think founders are so important in that. And it seems as companies grow, one of the things, especially if it's a technical founder or solo founder, that kind of thing, they want to get out of sales as quickly as possible. But I think that's their job is really the chief storyteller, and they have to be involved in that pretty much always. And just like you said, Steve Jobs, he's talking about the future and the direction of Apple and strategic initiatives and those kinds of things, and telling the story of the company, not where they've been, but where they're headed, really casting that vision internally, but also to their user base, to their potential customers. I think
Yeah.
it's even at that level, he's involved in the sales process.
Find me a Fortune 50 company that's in the technology space that's doing sales where the CEO isn't in some way, shape, or form involved. Andy Jassy's talking at AWS's conferences.
Yep.
Even still to date, Mark Benioff is talking. Elon Musk, like as involved as he's getting in politics, is out there launching his products as if he was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs did it literally until he couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
The guys that I've worked for, Jonah Goodhart, Anik Rahman, they do it. The guys that are in our category, like I look at Howard Lerman, who founded Yext, like that person, the last thing I think he would ever give up would be product and sales.
Yeah.
And so when I see somebody say, oh, I want to get away from that, I'm like, why? Granted, I'm a bias. Like you and I like sales, but I'm like, that's where all the money's made. The business of business is business. Like the money is made in sales. Why would you want to get away from that?
I think maybe it's a perception thing. If they don't want to be, what they're really saying is I don't want to be involved in the day-to-day nuts and bolts of sales, which makes sense. But you have to be involved as an executive sponsor on deals in with bigger customers. And bigger deals, you definitely want to be involved in the nuts and bolts of. But certainly at a higher level, being able to share the vision and tell the story of the company and the problem that you're solving, and paint the customer as the hero. And here's how we get you to where you want to go and get that outcome you're looking for.
Yeah, you just said it. I think if you found like a go-to-market channel, let's say you've gone multi-product at 10 million in ARR, like you built your first wedge product, you realized like it's actually not enough, we need to pivot or iterate, and you've got something else that leads. Like, and the team's cranking on it. Like you figured out your marketing funnels. It's never perfect. Like everybody who claims that there's like these linear growths to product market fit, I think have just like never actually worked at a company where like that's happened. Like, no, it's non-linear. It goes up and down. And customers will totally do things that are illogical. Like they'll go with a competitor that costs more money, even though you did a great job. But the CEO is involved. Like the CEO is in the big deals, like you said. They're working on the strategic ones where there's maybe some sort of product development happening, or maybe there's beta customers. They're definitely not relinquishing that. At least that's been my experience. That working for Matt Kaiser at Live in 10 or Jonah at Moat, like they were involved, hands on.
Yeah. And as founders are moving maybe out of the day-to-day, the nuts and bolts of the sales operation, the more tactical kinds of things, what are some practical steps they can take to ensure a smooth transition from them being true founder-led sales where they are doing everything to building a team and starting to pass some of those things on to other team members?
Yeah. Day one, when I started at Moat, Jonah called me and Chris Morgan, who's the VP of sales, into his office and I'm going to give you the pitch now. And he brought up the pitch deck and I said, do you mind if I record it? There was no gong or grain or anything like that. So I used Evernote. I recorded it. I made notes on the timestamp of when he switched slides because I wasn't video recording it. And then I transcribed it. What he gave me, I don't know if it was intentional or not. I believe that it was intentional, was here's how we talk to customers. Here's the deck that I use. Every slide has been stripped down to be like an image with a story that helps convey the narrative. And here's the talk track. Here's what I say, and here's how I transition it or how I adjust it based on the person I'm talking to. So the messaging shifted if you were talking to a publisher or an advertiser. And that thing, like that little thing, the deck and the story, which for me as a new seller, if it was just key talking points or, hey, here's abstractly what we're going after, I don't think it would have been as effective. But the fact that it was literally like a really well thought out script to the point that it like felt like entertainment. Like we had customers say to us, could you come and talk at our sales kickoff? Like it was like entertainment. That was really awesome. And so if you're a founder and you're like, hey, I've closed a bunch of deals, sure, you're going to want to have some ICP documentation. Sure, you're going to want to like have some stuff that says, here's who we go after and why. But I think you're probably, especially if your product is like mid-market or enterprise, like it's complex, you're probably going to want to sit down and have like at least like the 10-minute version or the 8-minute version of your story, which, even now with GPT and AI, like you can riff on that stuff and try to get a version that you can go experiment with customers. Your salespeople then won't be retrofitting your story with what they've learned in the past from other companies or guessing what should the story be, which will create a fragmentation in how you're going to market as a brand.
Yeah. Last time I talked, you used a train analogy where the founder is on one train and you've got the team on another. Walk me through that again. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, so the idea there is people use phrases or analogies all the time. We're building the airplane while we're flying it. And sure, I think that's cool. Working on the engine as you're coasting along. I actually like the idea of like trains on tracks. So like you have a certain length of track that you have laid that you are now cranking on. And now you've hired a couple more salespeople. Those are the tracks that then get elongated next to them. Like you owe it to the salesperson as you like bring them on board to offload some of your information into them. So think about it like the two cars are now moving alongside each other and you're offloading information to them. You are the best source of information if you close the deals. Like you are the first party information, primary source. In journalism, they talk about, are you talking to primary source? Somebody who is on the ground, who witnessed it with their own eyes, or is it secondary? They described it to somebody else who's now describing it to you. So you're primary source. You're like on that train. Sit down and literally just hand the information to people. Hey, here's the deals that I did. Here's like the steps that we went through. Here's why we went through those steps in the way that we did. That's you offloading the luggage from one train to the next. So then that train can be on its way. And if you create a culture of sharing information, which starts with you, like you have to lead by example, that seller will then naturally do it to the next one. That seller who got that excellent onboarding experience from you, who then got to go use stuff that actually worked because you spent the time thinking about it, when a new seller joins, we'll do it to them. Or when the product marketer joins and says, hey, who's hitting goal and can tell me like how we talk about these things, they will wrap their arms right around them and help them out. Yeah. So I think that's like the analogy, or at least the mental image as I've always got in my head when I'm thinking about that.
I think it's brilliant. It's a great mental picture just to think about that, because you can't stop the train. It's got to keep going. And so you're really, how do we pass that over?
Yeah.
And keep those going. And then, but I love that too. The side benefit, just like you said, is that they really understand this is the culture. This is how we do things around here. And so as you start bringing in more people, then they start doing that same thing.
It's your way, like it's your company way. These go beyond random words you put on your mission statement or your value statement. This is just how you do stuff. And something you just said, I think is totally right, which is you can't stop the train. You can't be like, hey, everybody. I think what I hear actually a lot is folks get overwhelmed and they're like, time out. Let's just sit down and all get organized. I understand that feeling of wanting that, but we can't just sit down and stop. Like we have to move forward. If the meeting is set for tomorrow, we're not going to move it. We have to rally together and think about what's the story we want to tell. We have to go work the late hours to put the deck together. And that to me is the analogy we were just talking about. You're offloading the luggage from one to the next. You can't just pause it and say, great, perfect world. Let's get it all together. Which I also think is like one of those things that people spend a lot of time on that I'm not really sure the effort matches the impact. tons of sales enablement materials, like structured trainings, doing like certifications where you're like, hey, everyone's going to memorize it and get certified now. I don't know that actually drives as much impact correlative to how much effort goes into it.
Yeah.
Versus find one that works and you actually won't have to certify. People will just do it. If it works, the salespeople who are comped will be incentivized to share that story. And if it doesn't work, the sales managers who you are compensating to coach those people will notice it and will correct it. And that won't necessarily happen in like, hey, we're going to do 10 hours of training now and teach you all these things, which by the way, like the amount of effort it takes to create them, they're now out of date. Like they're now no longer relevant signal.
I think that's really good. Salespeople will do what works, and
Yeah.
if it works, then they don't need a lot of training. They don't need certification. They're gonna do it. They're gonna use it. I see that all the time. Is salespeople will have one message, but the marketing material is different. What's going on there? Why is there a mismatch? That stuff doesn't work. It's
Yeah.
old. It's outdated. There's some problem with it, and they're doing something different anyway. So it goes back to that alignment. And,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
like that they're testing that and they're going to do what comes naturally, not just what they're certified on.
Yeah. Great teams won't really need to be aligned. There won't be as much politics. They'll just naturally
Yeah, they
snap
just
into
do
it.
it.
Yeah. Because everyone will know what their job is and they'll go do their job. That's why like you hear coaches say stuff like, go do your job. Because like I hired you to do something, go do it. I'm talking like football, like sports coaches.
Yeah.
I do think that like the resonance issue, so you said marketing will create something that sales doesn't always agree with. I was talking to a guy the other day, Nate Sullivan. He was over at Spotify. And I, for a long time, thought because I had experienced the script version of learning the moat pitch, that was like the way to do it. And what he said to me that I thought was really astute was, and it's possible that like the ACVs were different. So like for him in that scenario, like it was better to keep it short. I used to be a jazz musician and they would give us the lead sheet when we started. And this is like the notes.
Yep.
These are the notes that we're playing. They weren't like, this is the music we are playing. If you said this is the music, you know what it's going to sound like. If you're playing jazz, you're hoping that overlap of different people doing different things at a different time creates magic.
Yeah.
And his point was, I can identify what the lead sheet should say. What notes are we playing? The salesperson is like the actor. I'll just load them up and say, go try to hit these 5 things over the next 40-minute conversation. And then I'm listening just for those 5 things. Not did they use like the word the or there or and, or like an acronym versus the whole thing. Just did you hit the notes? And I think there's some genius to that, which requires a lot of trust between like a commercial marketing person who's listening and then a salesperson who's willing to go give it a shot, like writer and actor dynamic.
Yeah.
Actor dynamic.
And that's a different type of salesperson as well. So if you're talking about an SDR that's never made a phone call before and you're starting at ground zero, script is probably the better way to go. But when you're talking with somebody that's more seasoned, that's been around, that has some of those skills, that makes so much more sense than trying to stick to a specific script.
Yeah, like sales is, especially enterprise sales, it probably looks a little bit more like diplomacy. Like you're working with tons of different parties with competing ideas and different power dynamics at place. If you say to them, this is all you can do, you might as well be saying to a diplomat, these are your options. And that person needs to be able to go do some like behind the scenes stuff to make magic happen.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably like an interesting analogy there on like trust in the person that you're hiring. And you're right, though. If it's a junior person, give them a script. Teach them the rules so that then they can know how to break the rules.
That's
we got to know the rules.
important. Yeah. Yeah. You have to know the rules in order to know when and how you can break them.
Yeah. Because we all know what the goal is, right?
Yeah.
Growth. It's growth.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to grow ARR. We're trying to compound the bookings that we get. We're trying to do it as an everly increasing profit margin. If we start churning, why? Is it because we sold something that we don't actually do? Yes. Okay. Probably go back to scripting.
Done that.
Yeah, we've all been there. I've done bad deals. Like if you've never done a bad deal, like you probably aren't pushing it enough.
Yeah.
But if you're consistently doing bad deals, like you're probably not reflecting enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked about some of them, but what are some other common mistakes founders make when they're transitioning away from founder-led sales, and how do they avoid them?
The biggest one that I see is you aren't thinking enough about your funnels of new conversations. Where the customers live and how you can go talk to them to get them to want to engage in a sales process with you or a marketing funnel with you, whether that's PLG or SMB or mid-market or enterprise. I don't think you can ever take your eye off that prize. And when I see folks say like, all right, we closed our first 4 design partners, it's time to hire sales and now figure out our funnels. I just go, whoa, no, that seems like a really risky maneuver, because now you're saying the thing that I figured out how to do that probably was super nuanced, like even finding those companies to work with you, I'm now not going to spend time thinking about how to go like 5x that or 10x that and go see if I can repeat that. And folks will do what they read or in a book or what they see on LinkedIn, like cold calling, because that's the easiest.
Yeah.
But it's also possibly not the one that makes the most sense for you, especially if you have like much more accessible ways to go play. Like maybe you already have built some community. Like you already have a bunch of followers on LinkedIn that you can try to not necessarily convert into customers, but convert into funnels to talk to customers. They might know people. Go talk to them. Maybe it's like you are such a good public speaker that you're already on some sort of a conference circuit. Maybe like you're in the identity space in crypto and you get invited to talk places. Like we have a customer who is doing that. That's where you should be trying to cultivate pipeline, because that's actually your superpower. So I think that's always a really big mistake, is folks aren't thinking about, we do it on a 2x2 matrix. What's the likelihood of the probability of something being successful? And then what's our confidence that we will be able to actually go execute that? And so if you have like low probability likelihood, like I'm going to cold call the CMO of Nestle, and then like low confidence, like I've never done it before, that's probably not a great strategy.
Right.
It's probably going to cost you time before it costs you money. Vice versa, if you're like, hey, the likelihood of success, I believe, is we're going to run a bunch of SEO and ad campaigns to get in front of potential buyers. But your confidence that likelihood is even accurate, like that could be wrong.
Yeah.
You now just spent maybe $30,000 a month on SEO and paid ads that converted into nothing but a bunch of files in your CRM. So I would just be really creative on that. Make a big list of everything you could try to do, and then think really hard about what's the probability of it working, like just on its face. Does that make sense? And then what's your confidence that you can go try to execute it in a really complex way or in a simple way? And that usually is enough for sales to like then go work off of, because that's like then what's creating those leads that help you make the plan to plan, or at least enough of the coverage to have pipeline to go hit your goals.
Yeah. Is that the same type of framework you use when revenue stalls or something, revenue is slowed down, growth is slowed, to diagnose and uncover the underlying issues underneath that? Or how do
Yeah,
you think about that?
it's a little different. So as I put it, like the likelihood or like the probability of success versus confidence, I think about that more for like strategic decision making. Like we're about to go do something. We have some objective. Let's think about it in terms of probabilities and confidence to execute on those. What you just described is something's happened. Growth has slowed. I see that much more about a differential diagnosis, like how a doctor would try to find what's the most obvious and common thing that's causing this to happen. The symptom is growth has slowed. The disease, what's actually the underlying thing, could be something not so obvious. But it usually is the most simple explanation. So the channel that we had been trying slowed. It just isn't producing as much. Why? Why did it slow? Oh, wow, the person who was in charge of it went out on leave for 2 months. Okay, cool. We don't actually have to pivot the whole strategy. We just need to keep doing it again. It could be like we are not outpacing churn. So we're losing 1 out of every 2 customers we close. Okay, that's not actually a top of funnel issue. That's a retention issue.
Right.
So you can't just add more, because you'll never outpace it. You won't get to compound if you keep losing the principal. And so that's a different problem to go solve. But I think like thinking about that probably on a monthly basis, if you're sub 10 million at a minimum, is what you should be doing, if not like every single day.
That makes a lot of sense. And I
Yeah.
like the analogy there, just the diagnosis. A lot of times we want to focus on the symptoms and we're like, we want to treat those, but it's what is the underlying cause of that?
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
that happening?
My dad's a doctor, and he always said you treat the patient, not the disease. And you also manage, you work towards the disease, not just the symptoms.
Yeah.
So you manage the symptoms. If you have a headache, take an Advil. That will make the headache go away. But if you have a persistent headache and it's because you're not drinking enough water, like you don't need to take Advil every day. You need to start drinking more water. If it's because there's something else going on, like you're going to want to fix that. And so I think about it the same way in a business. Like this is a system with a bunch of different parts moving together. And if the system isn't producing the outcome that you thought it was going to produce, like think about it in a first principled way, in a diagnostic way, and try to then back into what's the highest probability thing we can go try to go fix to solve it quickly.
Yeah, really smart.
Yeah.
Before we talked about hospitality and specifically Unreasonable Hospitality, which is a fantastic book, and how do the principles of hospitality apply to be sales to create great customer experiences?
Here, let me actually, I hope that we can edit this. I have to message my 2 p.m. to let them know that I'm late.
Oh, sure.
Nicole, the chief marketing officer of Dot Dash. So
We'll
let's see,
wrap up.
Nicole. Yeah, I am 10 behind.
So this will be the last question,
Okay,
and then we'll wrap. So here we go. In
cool.
3, 2.
So you were asking about hospitality. Will Gadara, he was the GM and one of the owners of 11 Madison Park. Before that, he worked for Danny Meyer, owns Shake Shack and Gramercy Tavern and Union Square Cafe. He wrote a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. If you ever watched that show, The Bear, he was a producer on The Bear. And in the book, the concept that he gets across is that, and it's actually a build on top of Danny Meyer's Enlightened Hospitality, is that when you are in the hospitality business, your job isn't just to deliver food, isn't just to put food on a table and feed people. It's actually to create an environment where they feel seen and heard, which he sees as hospitality. And what they do that I think is just absolutely phenomenal is they take a probably 1000x lens effort towards how can we go do that for customers.
Yeah.
Like from the details of like somebody shows up and you take their coat and they don't even realize I didn't even get a ticket to go get my coat and bag back. It's because they've already assigned in the coat closet which hanger is associated to which seat and to which table and to which reservation. So that when then you come back, they already have your jacket for you. You didn't even necessarily notice it. Wow, how did they even know it was my jacket? But it created an environment where you didn't have to think about it. I think that the best B2B teams, especially those that are dealing in like many millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, should bring that same level of obsession over customer experience, not just in the product, but in how they interact with the people on your team. Because the people are the personification of the brand. And the micro moments that those people interact with your customers on is where you have an opportunity to enlighten or deliver an unreasonable level of hospitality to your customers. And then it won't be ROI and case studies that cause somebody to say, I went with that company. They'll say it's just different interacting with them. They're just a different type of team. And it's also something that you can't replicate overnight. You can't just hire a hospitality consultant to come in and tell your team to act differently. That's something that you start building brick by brick on the ground up. So like Guy and I think about that even for our business. When I do a product marketing interview or an interview where I'm getting knowledge from someone, I try to find something that I can be helpful to them with. But at a minimum, I'm going to send them a Zest, which is one of our customers, of some coffee that I love to keep in my bag and say, hey, I'm sure it's a stressful job. Here's a little caffeine on us. It's a to-go packet. So if you're on your next flight and you don't want to drink the crappy coffee that Delta has, you can make your own. It's from Partners. And it's like the next time that they're on that flight, I'll have solved a problem for them that we did months ago. And it costs very little to go do that. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but it's a mindset. So I think that there's like a lot of parallels in there that I take inspiration from that folks, if they care about it, can go do.
So good. So good. I love that because it's not something that can be replicated easily. And so I think that's one of the ways that you build a moat in your business and you really stand out. And just doing that little bit extra and start thinking about those small things and that experience. And I think we all have those with brands that we love. There's a reason that we love those brands. And it's not case studies and ROI, it's the experience.
100%. Yeah. If you work it backwards on the brands that you interact with, what is it about them that causes me to love them and want to share them with others? There's going to be some element of hospitality in there. It's going to be something that they're anticipating and making easier for you that goes beyond what you're spending on. And there's going to be others that you could look at and see the sort of the analog, the inverse,
Yes.
which is that's not a lot of money, but why is it so painful every time I do it?
Yes.
And like, why do I hate or dislike that brand because of that? Yeah. And I think that ends up being about what I would chalk it up to get even more specific than hospitality is attention to detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what is the finer detail that you're noticing because you obsess about it that the customer will also notice, but when overlooked could actually cause a little bit of pain, or when noticed could actually cause a little bit of delight. And that's where like happiness, I think, is built and love is built, and people end up wanting to spend more time with you, which again, like that's what you want if you're in B2B. Spend more time with
Exactly.
us.
Exactly. Well, where can people learn more about you and about Baku online?
Yeah, so if you want to find us on our website, projectbaku.com, if you click any of those contact us forms, you'll get an email from me. We don't do any automated emails. I know people say that can't scale, but I send hundreds of emails a day, and
Good.
like I can definitely write back to everybody who writes into us. If you find me on LinkedIn, I think the LinkedIn is the Peter Kuhn. I was able to snag that one, not Peter Kuhn. But send me a DM and I'd be happy to sync with you. I try to be very generous with our time because what goes around comes around. Or email me, pete@projectbaku.com, and I'd love to talk to you.
Excellent. We'll make sure and link that in the show notes. Peter, it's so great having a conversation. There's so much good stuff in here. So thanks for being on SaaS Fuel.
Yeah, Jeff, you're awesome, and I appreciate being on here. And if there's ever any way we can be helpful to you, just text me.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Peter, for coming on the show and sharing your insights and resources. You can learn more about Peter and Project Baku at projectbaku.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. At Champion Leadership, we've got full video episodes, trainings, outtakes, shorts, lots of stuff out there for you. And thought leaders share, I'll bet you're one of those. Share this episode with the person who may track metrics for how often they say, let's circle back. Everyone who shares this week gets a smart fridge that sends you notifications if your milk expires and adds a roadmap for future milk improvement. Version 2.0 maybe even pings you with, have you thought about oat milk? Have you ever wondered how artificial intelligence is reshaping the way we streamline digital processes and accelerate results? Join us next Tuesday as I sit down with Cody Schneider, prolific inventor and the visionary CEO behind Draft Horse AI and Swell AI. Cody has been at the forefront of crafting celebrated solutions that transform content workflows. So don't miss out on how his inventions are paving the way for the future of AI in business. When's the last time you had something so great you wanted more? Maybe some pie over the holidays or Thanksgiving, you went back for seconds. For only the second time ever in the history of the show, I have a repeat guest, and he's kicking off the new year. I am really thrilled to welcome back Wes Bush, best-selling author of Product-Led Growth and a heck of a pickleball player too. Yeah, as the founder of Product Led, Wes is on a mission to help businesses build products that sell themselves. So don't miss this comeback episode kicking off the new year. Really excited about that. So I will see you next time. And as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/saasfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.